Is Super Mario Land still good? Super Mario Land was a launch title for Nintendo's Game Boy handheld back in 1989. It was the first in a trilogy of sorts, with Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, and Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3 following in the ensuing years. But back to the game at hand, Super Mario Land was produced by the creator of the Game Boy himself, Gunpei Yokoi, whose other achievements include the Game & Watch handhelds as well as producing the original Metroid for the NES. Needless to say, the man left behind quite the legacy, one far larger than can fit into a review about a Game Boy title. The reason I even bring him up is because Super Mario Land had no involvement from Shigeru Miyamoto. The result is a Mario game with quite a few distinct elements in terms of gameplay and overall thematic design when compared to other titles in the series. And even with these changes, the game was well received by the press. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the game a 7.8 out of 10, stating, "Even though it's black and white and on a 2-inch screen, Super Mario Land is a fantastic game that is, above all, very fun to play. There are loads of things to discover and all new worlds to chart. It's a bit short, but there's enough challenge here to highly recommend this one." Mean Machines magazine scored the game a 9 out of 10, noting playability to the nth degree. The game is guaranteed a semi-permanent place in my Game Boy, along with Tetris, of course. They don't come much better than this, with great graphics and a tough challenge. Finally, Computer and Video Games magazine gave the game a 9.3 out of 10, proclaiming, "A small yet perfectly formed Mario whizzes past equally impressive sprites and backdrops, an arcade machine in your pocket." So, is Super Mario Land still this good after 27 years? Let's dive in. Super Mario Land begins with some familiarity, if you're comfortable with the original NES title. It's clear this game was inspired by the original Super Mario Bros., despite the third Mario Bros. Title having already been released in Japan during development. Mario himself features his classic moves, including running and jumping, along with a speed boost when holding the action button. Mario turns into Super Mario after ingesting the magic mushroom, growing in size, allowing you to break through blocks as well as take a hit of damage. It's all pretty standard stuff and should feel immediately familiar to Mario veterans. With that said, there are some differences. The flower power-up does not give Super Mario fireballs and instead a Super Ball. This projectile can only be fired one at a time, and the Super Ball bounces around the screen instead of skipping across the floor. Additionally, the Super Ball can be used to nab coins, which is kinda cool. Something else you'll notice right away is the Koopas react quite unexpectedly, exploding after jumping on them instead of sliding across the ground. Of all the changes made in Super Mario Land, the Super Ball and enemy behavior are the most drastic. So, on with the game. Unlike the early Mario titles, Super Mario Land takes place in Sarasaland instead of the Mushroom Kingdom. The princess being rescued is Princess Daisy instead of Peach. Still, the first two levels of the first world resemble those found in the NES Classic. The opening stage of the Birabudo Kingdom features rolling hills in the background, or maybe they're pyramids. You can duck through pipes to secret areas containing bonus coins, and there are plenty of Goombas, called Goombos, you can jump on. The second level too feels similar, with mushroom-style platforms you have to jump across, while bottomless pits await any mistimed jump. However, the third level is where Super Mario Land frees itself from the Mushroom Kingdom shackles and starts to feel like its very own beast. This underground level feels like an Egyptian tomb, complete with the appropriate music and enemies. The departure from the Mario norm feels refreshing, and this trend is continued to the very first boss. This lion-looking creature looks cool for sure, but does share a similar firing pattern and jumping behavior as Bowser from the NES game. These three levels conclude the first world, so it's off to World 2, Muda Kingdom. The first level opens with what appears to be a spaceship, which is odd. New enemies are also introduced, including seahorses and fish skeletons. The second level follows a similar motif, and a reliance on moving platforms really starts to become a prevalent feature of the level design. The final level of this second world changes things up completely, with Mario taking to the seas in a submarine called Marine Pop. This basically plays like a horizontal shooter, with Mario being able to freely move around while waves of enemies enter the screen. Bricks are even breakable with Mario's ship, adding a bit of depth to the gameplay. While this is an odd inclusion in a platformer, it works well and offers a nice diversion to the core gameplay. It would even be copied a year later in Sunsoft's Batman the video game, which speaks to the quality of the experience offered. Anyway, after defeating the end boss, which should offer little challenge to all but the most novice fans of shooters, we move on to World 3. Here, Mario arrives in the Eastern Kingdom, resembling Easter Island. The difficulty is again ramped up, with flying enemies featuring erratic behavior, along with quick-moving enemies requiring faster reflexes than what has been offered thus far. There is even a section where you have to ride along rolling boulders, again helping this third world play differently than those preceding it. The second and third levels follow a similar formula, with even more enemies such as spiders and tarantulas, and more challenging platforming such as collapsing blocks over bottomless pits. The final boss of this world is again quite different than the first two, requiring you to take the boulder jumping mechanics learned earlier and use those skills to get behind the boss and clear the stage. Again, this isn't the most challenging thing in the world, but is admittedly nicer than clearing the same boss for 8 straight worlds. Just saying. Our journey ends at World 4. Chai Kingdom is a Far East theme featuring plenty of bamboo along with some ninjas. If I'm honest, these stages feel a bit easier than the Eastern Kingdom levels. The ninja enemies are tricky for sure, with tough patterns, but you can usually jump right over them. The moving platform sections feel easier as well, with fewer enemies impeding progress and easier landings, preventing death. It kind of feels backwards in a way, but it probably doesn't matter in the grand scheme of the game. The final level of Chai Kingdom is another shooting stage, and it works exactly like the first. The screen scrolls horizontally, and you need to take down waves of enemies while shooting down the bricks blocking your path. Also, like the first time around, this is an entertaining romp with accurate controls and enough variety in the enemies to keep you engaged. There is even a section reminding me of the old arcade title Scramble, which is a charming nod to the genre's roots. The end of the level features Super Mario Land's final boss. This is the only boss in Super Mario Land featuring more than one part. At first, there is a cloud, and after hitting it enough times, the true boss is revealed, Tatanga. His attack is a missile that breaks into 3 parts. I found either diving just above or just below the middle projectile to be the most efficient strategy, allowing you to easily dodge the incoming fire while also landing hits on the baddie himself. Upon defeat, Mario finally rescues Princess Daisy, and our journey comes to an end. Then, of course, the credits roll. As you can no doubt hear, the soundtrack in Super Mario Land is actually quite good. The end credit tune is one of my favorites on the handheld, and for a majority of the game, the quality is quite high. The compositions are of decent length, and some of the melodies are the ultimate earworms. Graphically, however, Super Mario Land is definitely starting to show its age. Now, I get this as a launch title on what was extremely unfamiliar hardware at the time. 2-bit color on a tiny low-res screen hadn't exactly been done before, and Super Mario Land certainly pioneered how the genre would be tackled for years to come. Still, I can't help but feel underwhelmed by the entire visual presentation. For starters, the backgrounds are extremely primitive, featuring very few details on a vast plane of white. You would think this would allow more resources for actual level detail and sprite work, but this isn't really the case either. Super Mario Land is a fairly bland game. There just isn't a lot going on in many of the stages. Sure, there's a waterfall here and there, but little touches like this are simply few and far between. To make things worse, things are very oddly proportioned. Question blocks, mushrooms, Goombos, and bombshell Koopas are all tiny, especially compared to Mario, creating a very odd sense of scale. It all adds up to a game that very much feels like it was made in 1989, and doesn't hold up nearly as well as some of the best efforts on the Game Boy. On the flip side, there are some things I rather enjoy, besides the awesome music, of course. There are plenty of hidden nooks and crannies to explore, and plenty of pipes littered through each and every world, offering opportunities to grab extra coins. After all, you do receive an extra life for each 100 you collect. The end of each level also offers 2 different exits. If you take the time to reach the top one, which is often easier said than done, you are rewarded with a minigame giving a chance at extra lives. I enjoy little touches like this as it offers incentive to actually explore the barren landscapes. This of course brings us back to the question asked at the beginning of the video: is Super Mario Land still good? For me, a good platformer should contain 2 elements. First and foremost, it needs to have tight controls. Second, it needs fun levels to platform through. And I'm not so sure Super Mario Land does either of these things all that good. In fact, the controls are kinda lousy. I've spent a lot of time over the past couple of years playing Super Mario Land, trying to pinpoint what exactly feels so off for me. Is there something wrong with the controls, or is it more of a subjective thing? But I think it's safe to say Super Mario Land just doesn't feature the tight, pixel-perfect controls of the other 8-bit Marios. The momentum is extremely unreliable, making mid-air adjustments or landing a frustrating proposition. Worse yet, the momentum seems to change from slow to fast or fast to slow with little warning. After landing on an enemy, Mario might speed up unexpectedly, shattering my confidence. Landing on the edge of a platform yields a similar result, with Mario seemingly hitting the ground running, resulting in you running straight off a cliff when you were expecting a slight adjustment. Now, I'm not sure if I'm explaining it correctly, but if you haven't played this in a while, I challenge you to give it a shot. I think you'll find the game simply lacks the precision found in better 8-bit platformers. This sloppy feeling is also carried over into the graphics. At times, it feels like the background is in front of the foreground objects, causing items like the mushroom to seem transparent. This phenomenon didn't appear in later entries in the trilogy. This leads into the second item, gameplay design. First, I don't mind the lack of vertical movement in the environments. Being a strictly left-to-right affair certainly has its charms, and there is still plenty of exploration to be had, especially when you are regular Mario. My main issue with Super Mario Land has to do with the Super Ball. The levels are rarely designed with your primary projectile in mind. Occasionally, you can ricochet the ball off the wall and ceiling, like when taking down the first boss. You can even use it to collect coins in designated sections, but for the most part, it just flies into the air and disappears off the screen. And because you can only fire one at a time, you sort of just sit there, helpless. There are a few flying enemies which seem designed for the Super Ball, but these are few and far between. Generally speaking, the enemies walk along the ground, and Mario would have been better served with a weapon designed around a majority of the enemies. To be fair, you'll rarely die because of enemies though. Instead, you'll die from bottomless pits. The second half of Super Mario Land features a ton of tricky platforming, sometimes on platforms just a single block wide. Oftentimes, you have to carefully navigate an array of moving platforms, and other times, you need to jump from collapsing blocks, and quite frankly, the controls in Super Mario Land just aren't up to the task. Despite beating this game numerous times over the past few years, I still received a game over on my first recording session. This is something I don't experience with the other 8-bit Mario games, and it's because the controls just don't offer any sort of consistency to make you feel confident in your platforming. I can't help but feel some of the luster and polish went missing without Miyamoto at the helm. Don't get me wrong though, Super Mario Land is far from a bad game. The short length of just 12 levels and a 30 to 35 minute length do mitigate many of the issues and prevents the game from ever getting tedious or boring. The length is just about right, especially for an old handheld experience. There's also a second loop featuring more enemies if you're into that sort of thing. And while the controls leave room for improvement, a majority of the time they are adequate for the task at hand. It's just annoying when the game asks too much of the player. Some tighter controls or some tweaks to the level design taking into account Mario's quirks would have gone a long way. Super Mario Land is certainly better than some of the awful platformers that would follow during the 16-bit era, like the Bubsy series and my personal nemesis, Zool 2. It's always important to keep things in perspective. At the end of the day, Super Mario Land is a quirky outlier in the Mario universe and well worth a look for fans of the series, but after 27 years, some of the new car smell is beginning to wear off.